Millionaire CEO hires a young janitor to pretend to be his bride. He's shocked. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into the story. Millionaire CEO hires a young janitor to pretend to be his bride. He's shocked when Sarah hadn't expected her life to change so suddenly. Working long hours at a local cleaning service, she barely made enough to cover her bills. A simple, modest life was all she knew. But everything shifted when she received an unexpected phone call one evening. The voice on the other end of the line was calm, authoritative, something she wasn't used to hearing. "Miss Sarah, I need you to come to my office tomorrow. I have a very important proposition for you." The man on the phone was Gabriel Hunt, a name she recognized from the headlines. He was a self-made millionaire, CEO of one of the largest tech firms in the city. Why would someone like him want to talk to someone like her? Sarah had no idea, but she couldn't ignore the opportunity. So, the next morning, she found herself in a sleek office building in the heart of downtown, the polished floors reflecting the sterile, cold beauty of the high-rise. As she stepped into Gabriel Hunt's office, her heart raced. He was exactly how she imagined: tall, with sharp features, and a presence that commanded attention. The moment she entered, he stood up from behind his desk and gestured to the chair in front of him. "Sarah, I'll get straight to the point. I need your help. I'm in a situation where I need someone to pretend to be my wife for a short time. I'll pay you well for your time, and you can walk away with a sum that will change your life. There will be no real romantic attachment, just a business arrangement." Sarah blinked, processing his words. A contract marriage? The idea seemed absurd. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" she asked, her voice a little shaky. Gabriel nodded, his expression serious. "Yes. All I ask is that you accompany me to a few events, meet my family, and pose as my partner in public. You'll be compensated handsomely, and when this is over, we both walk away from it. No strings attached." Sarah's mind raced. She had nothing to lose. She was struggling to pay rent, to keep a roof over her head. The money he was offering could solve all of her problems. But this was something else. A chance to step into another world, a world of wealth and luxury that she had only seen in magazines. But still, there was something in Gabriel's eyes, something that made her hesitate. He wasn't just offering money. There was an underlying tension, a need, and that intrigued her. As Sarah sat there, listening to his calm, collected words, she realized this was an opportunity that might never come again. And as much as she was reluctant to dive into this strange arrangement, the thought of a life without worry, of freedom from bills and constant stress, was too much to ignore. "Okay," she said, the words slipping from her lips before she could think twice. "I'll do it, but I need to know the details first." Gabriel's lips curved into a slight smile, as if he knew she would say yes. "I'll have everything ready for you. We'll start with a gala tomorrow evening. You'll wear a dress, act the part, and you'll see exactly what I mean." Sarah nodded slowly, still unsure of what she had just agreed to, but at the same time, feeling a flicker of excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. This could be the start of something huge. As she walked out of the office, her mind raced with thoughts of what was to come. The life she had known, the simple, quiet life, was about to be turned upside down. Would she be able to pull this off? Would she fit into a world so far removed from her own? And what about Gabriel? What was his real reason for wanting a stranger to pose as his wife? The questions swirled in her head, but one thing was certain: this was only the beginning. The following evening, Sarah stood before the full-length mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the strap of the elegant dress Gabriel had arranged for her. The fabric felt unfamiliar, luxurious, smooth, and flowing, a stark contrast to the worn clothes she usually wore to work. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy ponytail, was now styled neatly, framing her face in soft waves. She looked almost like a different person, but inside she felt the same, unsure, nervous, and out of place. She ran her fingers over the fabric one last time, took a deep breath, and reminded herself why she was doing this. The money, the opportunity. This was her way out of the endless cycle of worry. She had nothing to lose. As she grabbed her small, worn clutch, she quickly checked her reflection one more time before heading out the door, her heart beating faster with every step. Gabriel's office was located in one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in the city, and tonight's gala would be the event of the year. Sarah had never been to anything like it. She had never even imagined stepping into such an elite world. When she arrived at the venue, the grand entrance was lit with sparkling chandeliers, and the hum of chatter filled the air. The sound of glasses clinking and the soft rustling of silk dresses and tuxedos surrounded her as she stepped inside. It was like something out of a movie. Sarah felt a wave of anxiety rise in her chest as she navigated through the crowd, trying to stay calm. She was just here to pretend, just here to play the role of someone she wasn't. She tried to remind herself of that, but the lavish surroundings and expensive perfume in the air made it hard to focus. Gabriel wasn't hard to spot. He stood tall, as commanding as ever, surrounded by people who seemed to gravitate toward him with ease. His sharp suit made him stand out in the crowd, and his confident smile was enough to draw anyone in. As Sarah approached him, she felt a pang of uncertainty. What would he think of her now, standing before him in this unfamiliar world? Would she fit in? Would she be able to keep up with the pretenses? Gabriel turned his head as she neared, and when his eyes landed on her, she saw something shift in his gaze, a mixture of surprise and appreciation. "Sarah," he said smoothly, his voice as calm and steady as ever, "you look stunning." His words made her blush, and she fumbled for something to say. "Thank you," she said, managing a small smile. "This feels so different." Gabriel chuckled, the sound warm and reassuring. "It's not a world you're used to, but I think you'll adapt. Just remember, you're here to help me. Just play the part." Sarah nodded, feeling a sense of reassurance in his voice. She could do this. After all, it was just an act. Gabriel took her arm gently and led her through the crowd, introducing her to various high-profile guests. Each time they met someone new, he made sure to introduce her as his fiancée, a role that felt more natural with every passing minute. As they mingled, Sarah felt herself slowly relaxing. The pressure of fitting in began to fade as she focused on her role. She could tell that people were starting to buy into the act. They smiled at her, complimented her, and treated her like she belonged. Gabriel kept a close eye on her, occasionally checking in to make sure she was comfortable, but otherwise, he let her handle herself. By the time the gala came to a close, Sarah had almost forgotten that this was all a facade. She had almost convinced herself that she was living the life she'd always dreamed of. As the event wound down and guests started to leave, Gabriel walked her to the exit, his hand on her back in a protective gesture. "You did well tonight," he said, his voice low. "I think they all bought it." Sarah smiled, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. She hadn't expected it to be so draining, but in the end, it had worked. "Thank you," she said, grateful for his encouragement. "I was nervous, but it didn't seem so bad." Gabriel paused as they reached the car, turning to face her. "You were great, but remember, this isn't over. There's more to this than just tonight. We still have a long way to go, and I need you to stay focused." Sarah nodded, her heart sinking slightly. She had known this wasn't just a one-time thing, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel more real. "I understand," she said quietly, feeling the weight of the arrangement settle in. As they drove away from the gala, Sarah couldn't help but think about what she had just experienced. The glamour, the luxury, the people, all of it felt so surreal. It was like a dream she never thought she could live. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the lines between the act and reality were starting to blur. She had never expected this arrangement to stir up any real emotions. But now, as she sat in the back seat of the car, her thoughts turned to Gabriel. There was something about him. Something that went beyond the business deal. She wasn't sure what it was yet, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to change her life in ways she hadn't anticipated. The next few weeks passed in a blur for Sarah. What had started as a simple arrangement had quickly evolved into something far more complicated. Gabriel and she attended numerous events together, gala dinners, business meetings, charity fundraisers, and each time, The role she played as his fiancée felt more real. She found herself becoming more comfortable in this high society world, yet at the same time, the lines between acting and reality seemed to blur. She'd find herself laughing at Gabriel's jokes, sharing small private moments with him that felt intimate, but every time she reminded herself that it was all just part of the deal. She was just playing a part, and nothing more. One evening, as they sat together at yet another gala, Sarah couldn't help but feel a strange sense of longing. Gabriel had taken her hand as they made their way across the ballroom, and the simple touch sent a flutter through her chest. It was a fleeting moment, one that she quickly brushed aside as nothing more than the result of being in close proximity to him so often. He was, after all, just a business partner in this arrangement, nothing more. But then, during the quiet moments between speeches and handshakes, Sarah noticed something in Gabriel's demeanor. He wasn't just the same as before. There was a subtle shift in the way he looked at her, the way he listened to her when she spoke, and the way his gaze lingered just a bit longer than it should. Was she imagining it? She couldn't tell. Maybe it was just her own emotions playing tricks on her, but there was something in the way he seemed to soften when he looked at her, something that felt too genuine for it to be purely for the sake of the contract. It was confusing. That night, as they headed back to his penthouse, the drive was unusually quiet. Sarah stared out of the window, her thoughts a mess. Gabriel's sudden change in behavior was both confusing and unsettling. She hadn't signed up for this. She had agreed to pretend to be his fiancée, not to fall for him, not to feel anything beyond the professionalism of their arrangement. But every time he smiled at her, every time he touched her hand, a part of her one she desperately tried to ignore, felt something deeper than what she had expected. As they arrived at his penthouse, Gabriel turned to her with a slightly furrowed brow. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft, an edge of concern in it that she hadn't heard before. Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to say anything that might complicate things. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Just tired, I guess." Gabriel nodded, but his eyes didn't leave her. There was a silence between them, one that hung heavy in the air. He took a step closer, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might say something more, something real, but then he seemed to pull back. "Well, get some rest," he said, his voice returning to its usual calm, businesslike tone. "Big day tomorrow." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle between them. She couldn't understand why she felt so conflicted. This was all just a game, wasn't it? But somehow, in the quiet of his penthouse, with him standing so close, it didn't feel like a game anymore. The next day, Sarah tried to shake off the feeling of unease that had followed her into Gabriel's penthouse. They had another event to attend, another chance to continue the facade. But as they sat in the back of the car on the way there, she couldn't ignore the fact that something had shifted in their dynamic. Gabriel wasn't acting the same. There was a gentleness to him now, an attention that felt almost too personal for their arrangement. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if he was starting to develop real feelings for her. She couldn't even begin to comprehend how complicated that would make everything. She had come into this with one goal in mind: the money. It was supposed to be simple. But now, she wasn't sure what to believe. When they arrived at the event, Sarah found herself on edge. She couldn't help but notice how Gabriel kept his hand on her back as they entered, guiding her through the crowd with more care than he usually did. His touch was steady, possessive almost, but she couldn't tell if it was just him being protective or if there was something more. Throughout the night, he was attentive, watching her with a gaze that seemed more than just professional. It made Sarah uncomfortable in a way that she couldn't quite explain. Was this what she had been afraid of? Was she starting to fall for him? The more she tried to ignore her feelings, the stronger they seemed to grow. It wasn't supposed to be like this. She had agreed to pretend, to act. But now, with every word he spoke, with every touch, she felt a piece of her resolve slipping away. She had to keep herself in check. She had to remember that this was all just a contract, that nothing real could come of this. But deep down, she wasn't so sure anymore. The next few days felt like a whirlwind for Sarah. Everything was happening so quickly, and she wasn't sure how to keep up. The events, the lavish dinners, the constant pressure to act like someone she wasn't, it was all starting to weigh on her. She had gone into this arrangement thinking it would be simple, a way out of her financial troubles. But now, every time she looked at Gabriel, the confusion in her heart grew. She was no longer sure where the act ended and where her real feelings began. One evening, after another successful event, Sarah found herself sitting alone in a quiet corner of Gabriel's penthouse. The evening had gone off without a hitch, just like all the others. She had played her part perfectly. But as the silence stretched between them, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were beginning to change. Gabriel had been distant, almost as if he was avoiding her. There had been moments throughout the evening where their eyes met, where the connection between them seemed almost too real. And yet, when they were alone, he was cold, guarded. It was as if he was afraid to let his guard down. Sarah had never expected this. She had thought that by now, she would have been able to separate her emotions from the situation. But it was getting harder and harder to ignore how she felt about him. The gentle way he touched her, the times he went out of his way to make sure she was comfortable, it was all starting to feel too personal, too real. She was no longer just playing a role. She was falling for him. It was late when Gabriel finally entered the room, looking as composed as always, his sharp features lit by the soft glow of the lamp. He smiled at her, but there was something in his eyes, a hesitation she hadn't seen before. He didn't speak immediately, instead walking over to the bar to pour himself a drink. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she watched him. He looked so familiar, yet so distant. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke. "Sarah," he began, his voice low and steady. "You've been doing a great job. You've exceeded my expectations, actually. But I need to know, how are you holding up?" The question caught her off guard. She had expected him to talk about the business side of things, not about her. "I'm fine," she said quickly. But there was a part of her that wanted to tell him everything, how she was starting to feel like she was losing herself in this role, how she was afraid of what might happen next. But instead, she just smiled, forcing the words out. "I'm doing well, really. Just a little tired, that's all." Gabriel's eyes narrowed slightly, studying her. For a moment, the walls between them seemed to crumble. She could see that he was weighing something in his mind, something he hadn't shared with her. "I'm sorry if this is getting to you," he said, his voice softening, almost as if he genuinely cared. "I never meant for things to get complicated. This was just supposed to be temporary, just a deal." Sarah felt a pang in her chest at his words. She had been thinking the same thing, but hearing him say it out loud made her realize how much she had invested in this. It wasn't just the money anymore. It wasn't just the luxury, the world she had entered. It was him. She was starting to care for him, and that scared her more than anything. "It's fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I signed up for this, remember? It's just part of the job." But even as she said the words, she knew they weren't true. This wasn't just a job anymore. There was something else, something deeper. Gabriel didn't respond right away, instead looking away, his gaze distant. "I never asked for this either," he said quietly. "I never wanted to need someone like you, but I do." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat at his words. What did he mean by that? Was he starting to feel the same way about her? Or was he just trying to reassure her that this was all part of the deal? She wasn't sure. "We don't have to do this anymore," he continued, his voice barely audible. "If you want out, I'll let you go. I've never been good at this whole pretending thing. I'm not good at playing games." Sarah looked up at him, her heart racing. She could see the vulnerability in his eyes now, something she hadn't expected. He was offering her an out, but part of her didn't want to take it. She didn't want to leave. "Not yet." "I don't know what to say," she replied, her voice shaky. "I never thought I'd get this far, but I don't know if I can just walk away." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words and emotions that neither of them knew how to deal with. Finally, Gabriel spoke again, his voice thick with something she couldn't quite place. "You don't have to walk away, but we can't keep pretending forever." "I don't want to keep pretending." His words hung in the air between them, leaving a sense of uncertainty, of things unsaid. Sarah didn't know what to do with his confession. She had never expected any of this, and now she was torn between what she thought she wanted and what her heart was telling her. The tension between them was palpable, and she could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She wanted to say something, anything, but all she could do was stare at him, unsure of what would happen next. The silence between them stretched on, thick and heavy with words left unspoken. Sarah sat there, her heart pounding in her chest, unsure of what to say. Gabriel had just opened a door, offering her a way out, but the truth was, she didn't want to leave. She didn't want this arrangement to end, not when she had started to feel something real for him, something she had never planned on. She thought she was in control, that she could keep her feelings separate from the job. But now, everything was different. His words echoed in her mind. Asterisk. I don't want to keep pretending forever. Asterisk. Those words lingered in the air, leaving her to question everything. Was this real? Or was he just trying to get her to walk away so things could return to normal? Sarah looked at Gabriel, her voice barely a whisper. I don't want to leave either, she admitted, her throat tight. But this is complicated. I never expected it to feel this way. Gabriel's expression softened, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something more vulnerable. He leaned in slightly, his gaze fixed on hers. I didn't expect it either, he said quietly. But here we are. Sarah swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words. She had never expected to care about him like this. The walls she had built up to protect herself were crumbling, and she wasn't sure how to stop it. She had started this as a way out, a means to escape her struggles. But now, she was caught in something she couldn't control. She couldn't deny the connection between them. There was something about Gabriel, his quiet strength, his kindness when he let his guard down, that had slowly wormed its way into her heart. She had tried to resist it, tried to stay detached, but now, she wasn't sure if it was even possible. Gabriel broke the silence, his voice softer now, almost hesitant. I know this isn't easy, he said, his hand reaching out to gently take hers. But maybe we should stop pretending. Maybe we should figure out what this really is, without all the games, without the act. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes making her heart race. Could this be real? Could he actually want something more than just the contract they had started with? Are you sure? She asked, her voice trembling. I mean, I don't want to complicate things more. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Gabriel's gaze never left hers. I don't know if I'm ready either, he said with a small smile. But I can't keep pretending like it's just business. I can't keep acting like you're just a part of the deal. His words hit Sarah harder than she expected. She had been so focused on the practical side of things, on the money, on the escape, that she hadn't allowed herself to truly consider what this could mean. But now, with Gabriel standing before her, offering her something real, something beyond the contract, she was torn. She had never imagined this would happen. She never thought she would be in a position to care about someone like him, someone who had so much power, so much wealth. She was just a janitor, a girl trying to make it through each day. But somehow, with him, it felt different. There was something about the way he made her feel like she was more than just a role, more than just a part of a game. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted more than just a business arrangement too. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. So, what does that mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel's fingers gently squeezed hers. It means we stop pretending, he said. His voice steady, but with a hint of uncertainty. It means we take a chance on something real, something neither of us expected. It means we try. Sarah's heart fluttered as the weight of his words sank in. Could they really do this? Could they really make something real out of this situation that had started as a lie? She didn't know, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she wanted to try. She wanted to take a chance, even if it scared her. She didn't want to walk away from this. From him. Okay, she said softly, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and hope. I'm willing to try. Gabriel's smile was warm, genuine, and for the first time, Sarah felt like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just a mistake. Maybe this was the beginning of something more. As they stood there, their hands still intertwined, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't worried about the future, about the contract, about the money. She was just focused on the here and now. And right now, the only thing that mattered was Gabriel. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was ready to find out. The next few days felt different for Sarah. There was an ease between her and Gabriel now, a new dynamic that neither of them had expected. They still attended events, still played their roles in front of others, but something had shifted in their private moments. Gabriel was no longer just the CEO she had agreed to work for. He was starting to feel like someone she could rely on, someone she could trust. The distance that had once been there between them had closed, and with every passing day, Sarah found herself growing closer to him, her feelings deepening in ways she hadn't anticipated. She tried to keep her emotions in check, reminding herself that this was still part of the arrangement, still just a contract. But with every smile he gave her, with every kind word, it became harder to maintain that distance. It wasn't just the luxury and comfort that had drawn her in, it was him, Gabriel. The man who had taken her from a life of struggle and given her something she never thought she could have: security, freedom, and a glimpse of a life she had never dared dream of. And, slowly, she realized that she had come to depend on him in a way that went beyond the arrangement they had made. They were no longer just playing roles. They were beginning to become something real. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting, Gabriel invited Sarah to join him for lunch. It was a rare moment where they weren't surrounded by other people, where it was just the two of them. They sat across from each other at a small cafe, the soft hum of conversation around them, adding to the intimacy of the moment. Gabriel's usual composed demeanor seemed to soften in the quiet of the cafe, and Sarah couldn't help but notice how much more relaxed he looked without the weight of the business world on his shoulders. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice gentle, yet filled with curiosity. "Is something bothering you?" Sarah hesitated. She hadn't realized she had been withdrawn, but now that he pointed it out, she could feel the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. She had been trying so hard to keep her emotions at bay, but now it felt like she couldn't hold back anymore. "I guess I've been thinking," she said slowly, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "Thinking about everything, about what this all means. I didn't expect things to feel this real." Gabriel's eyes softened, and for the first time, Sarah saw a flicker of something more in them, something that mirrored her own uncertainty. "I didn't expect it either," he admitted, his voice quiet but sincere. "But I think we both know this isn't just a business arrangement anymore." His words hung in the air between them, and Sarah felt her heart race. Could it be possible that he felt the same way? That he wasn't just going along with this because of the contract? That maybe, just maybe, he was starting to care for her too? She looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. "What does that mean for us?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Gabriel leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking with hers. "It means that I want to be honest with you," he said, his tone serious now. "I don't want to keep pretending, and I don't want you to feel like you have to either. I can't promise I have all the answers, but I know that I want to try. I want to see where this goes, without the walls, without the act." Sarah's heart swelled at his words. It felt like everything she had been holding back was suddenly released, like the weight she had been carrying was lifted. She had been afraid to admit how much she had come to care for him, but now, in this moment, it felt like the truth was finally coming to light. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she was willing to find out. "I want that too," she said softly, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I don't want to pretend anymore either." Gabriel reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers. "Then let's stop pretending," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. In that moment, Sarah knew that things were changing between them. They were no longer bound by the terms of a contract or an arrangement. What they had now was something real, something that neither of them had expected, but both of them were willing to explore. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of new possibilities. As they walked back to Gabriel's office, Sarah felt a sense of excitement she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She was no longer afraid of what might happen next. She was ready for whatever came next. She had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for: a chance at love, a chance at something real. And for the first time, she felt like she wasn't just a part of someone else's plan. She was a part of something of her own making. The following weeks were filled with a new kind of tension, one that was far more personal than anything Sarah had ever expected. She and Gabriel no longer just played the roles of a business arrangement. They were slowly becoming something more, something real. Their connection was undeniable. Yet, with every passing day, the weight of the truth settled on Sarah's shoulders more heavily. She had agreed to this arrangement, knowing it was meant to be temporary. But now, as the days stretched on, The thought of returning to her old life seemed impossible. Gabriel had made it clear that he wanted to stop pretending, that he wanted something real between them. And Sarah, despite her fears, despite her doubts, found herself wanting the same thing. But as much as she had come to care for him, she still wasn't sure what was truly at stake. Could she really trust him? Was he as serious about this new path as he seemed? Or was it just another fleeting decision? One evening, as they sat together in his office after another long day of meetings, Sarah found herself grappling with those questions. Gabriel had been distant for the past few days, almost as if something was on his mind. He hadn't shared much with her about the details of his company, his plans, or his future. The walls that had started to come down seemed to be creeping back up. Sarah couldn't ignore the shift. She had started to see more of the man behind the polished facade. But now, that man seemed to be slipping away from her once again. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice gentle but filled with concern. Gabriel looked up from the papers in front of him, his expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence between them, heavy and thick. Finally, he set the papers down, looking at her with a level of intensity that made her heart race. "I'm just worried," he said slowly. "About everything. About us. About the future." Sarah's stomach twisted at his words. She could feel the uncertainty in his tone, and it echoed her own fears. "What do you mean?" she asked quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I thought we were doing okay. I thought we were on the same page." Gabriel stood up and began pacing the room, his hands running through his hair in frustration. "We are," he said quickly, then paused. "But I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if I can keep pretending like everything is fine when I know it's not." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Was he saying he wanted to end things? She had feared this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure how to respond. "You're not pretending," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Neither of us are. We're just trying to figure things out." Gabriel stopped pacing and looked at her with something like vulnerability in his eyes. "I never thought I would let someone in like this. I've always kept my emotions locked away, always kept everything separate. But with you, it's different." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat as she looked at him. His words resonated deep within her, but she didn't know what to say. Could they really navigate this new path? Or were they just two people caught in something neither of them fully understood? Gabriel walked over to her, his movements slow, almost hesitant. He gently cupped her face in his hands, his gaze softening. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready for," he said quietly. "But I can't keep pretending that this isn't real. I care about you, Sarah. I care about what we have." His words sent a rush of warmth through her chest, but also a wave of fear. Could this be real? Could she trust him with her heart when everything about their relationship had started with a lie? Gabriel seemed to sense her hesitation. He pulled back slightly, his hands still resting on her arms. "You don't have to make any decisions right now, but I need you to know that I'm here, and I want to be here. With you." Sarah looked into his eyes, searching for any sign that this wasn't just another temporary feeling. She had already given so much of herself to this arrangement, but could she really open herself up to him completely? She wasn't sure. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I know I don't want to lose this, whatever this is." Gabriel smiled softly, his eyes filled with something that made her heart swell. "Then let's figure it out together," he said quietly. And in that moment, Sarah knew that they were standing at the beginning of something new, something they would have to build together. It wouldn't be easy, but they had already taken the first step. They had opened up to each other in a way that neither of them had expected, and now they would have to trust each other as they moved forward. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she wasn't just pretending anymore. She was ready to find out where this could go. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Sarah and Gabriel continued to grow. But this time it wasn't from uncertainty, it was from something far deeper. They had come to a silent understanding, a mutual recognition that they were no longer just playing a part. Their connection, their feelings, had shifted into something real. Sarah could no longer pretend that this was just a business arrangement. Gabriel was no longer just the CEO she had agreed to work for. He was someone who had captured her heart in a way she never expected. But as they spent more time together, they both knew that things could not stay this way forever. They had to confront what was really at the heart of their relationship, the truth of who they were, and what they wanted from each other. One evening, Gabriel asked Sarah to meet him at a private dinner, just the two of them. It was a rare moment where they could escape the public eye and focus on what had been growing between them. As she arrived at the restaurant, she could already tell this wasn't going to be like the others. The ambiance was intimate, the lighting low and warm, and the soft music playing in the background created an almost magical atmosphere. It was as though this night was meant to be different. Sarah walked in, searching for Gabriel, and found him sitting at a corner table, a glass of wine in front of him, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. He smiled when he saw her, and it felt different this time, genuine, without the usual distance between them. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice warm and inviting. Sarah's heart fluttered at his words. She had gotten used to his compliments, but tonight they felt like something more. She smiled back, feeling a bit shy. "Thank you. This place, it's perfect." Gabriel nodded, his expression serious now. "I wanted us to have some time to talk, to figure out what happens next." Sarah's stomach twisted slightly at his words. "What do you mean?" she asked, unsure of what he was going to say. Gabriel took a deep breath before answering, his eyes locking with hers. "We've been pretending for so long, and we both know this isn't just about the contract anymore. I care about you, Sarah. I care about us. But I don't want you to feel trapped in this. I want to know if you're ready to take the next step with me, or if this everything we've built is something you still want." The weight of his words settled in her chest. This was the moment she had been avoiding, the moment that would determine where they went from here. She had known they couldn't keep pretending, but hearing him say it out loud made it all the more real. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt this way before, Gabriel. I didn't expect any of this to happen. I came into this thinking it was just a job, just a contract, but now—" She paused, trying to gather her thoughts. "Now, I'm not sure if I can walk away. I don't know what it would mean if I did." Gabriel reached across the table, taking her hand gently in his. "You don't have to decide everything right now," he said softly. "But I want you to know that I'm not asking you to stay because of the contract or because of what's expected of us. I'm asking you because I want to be with you. I want us to be real." Sarah felt a rush of emotions flood through her. She had spent so long keeping her heart guarded, focusing on the surface of their arrangement. But now, as she looked into Gabriel's eyes, she realized how much she had changed. She wasn't the same person who had walked into this deal months ago. She had fallen for him, she had fallen for the man he was, not just the CEO or the person she had once assumed him to be. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was just a part of his plan. She felt like she was a part of something that was bigger than both of them. "I want that too," she said finally, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "I want to see where this goes. I don't want to pretend anymore either." Gabriel smiled, the relief evident in his expression. "Then let's stop pretending. Let's figure this out together, without all the walls and the contracts." For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She wasn't sure what the future held, but as she sat there with Gabriel, she knew one thing for certain. They were no longer just two people pretending. They were real, and that was enough. As the days passed, Sarah and Gabriel settled into a new rhythm, one that felt more natural, more honest. The contract that had started everything between them now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by something much deeper, something that neither of them had expected but both were slowly embracing. They no longer needed to hide behind roles or pretenses. What they had was real, and it was growing stronger with every moment they spent together. It wasn't always easy, though. There were still doubts, still fears lingering in the back of their minds. Gabriel, with all his wealth and success, had never been someone who easily opened up to others, and Sarah, having spent most of her life protecting her heart, found it difficult to fully trust. But together, they were learning to navigate the challenges. They took things one day at a time, allowing the connection they shared to grow naturally, without forcing it. One evening, a few months after their conversation about being real with each other, Gabriel surprised Sarah with an unexpected gesture. It was their anniversary, and instead of the usual grand event, he had planned something intimate, a quiet dinner at his favorite restaurant, far from the prying eyes of the media and business partners. It was a rare moment just for them, and as they sat across from each other, Gabriel took her hand in his thumb gently brushing over her skin. "I know we've been through a lot," he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. "But I want you to know that I'm grateful for you for everything you've done, for how you've changed my life." Sarah's heart swelled at his words, and she felt the warmth of his touch spread through her. She had never expected this, never thought that a simple agreement could turn into something so meaningful, so real. "I never imagined that I would find something like this," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "I thought it was just a job at first, but now it's everything." Gabriel smiled, the intensity in his eyes deepening. "I know it wasn't easy, but you've made me realize that there's more to life than work, than money. There's love, and there's happiness, and that's what I want with you." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat as she looked at him, her emotions overflowing. He had given her so much more than she had ever thought possible. He had shown her a life filled with love and possibilities, not just the luxury she had once dreamed of. But most of all, he had shown her what it meant to truly trust, to let someone in. "I want that too," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I don't need anything else. I just need you." Gabriel's gaze softened, and he leaned forward, his eyes filled with affection. "And you have me, Sarah. You always have." The moment felt like a turning point in their relationship. A moment when everything fell into place. All the doubts, all the fears, all the uncertainty, they seemed to fade into the background as they looked at each other. They didn't need to say anything more. The connection they shared was enough. Later that evening, as they left the restaurant hand in hand, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of peace settle over her. The future was no longer a terrifying unknown. It was a path they would walk together, one step at a time. She had come into this with nothing but uncertainty, but now she had everything she needed. Gabriel, the man who had once been a stranger, was now the one she loved, the one she trusted. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah knew that she had made the right choice. The life she had once imagined for herself, simple, quiet, and filled with struggle, was gone. In its place was something more, something that was real. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next, knowing that as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything. In this touching tale of love, ambition, and unexpected connections, we dive into a captivating journey where a young woman unexpectedly crosses paths with a wealthy CEO. As the story unfolds, we explore the complexities of their evolving relationship. As they navigate through the boundaries of business arrangements and emotional vulnerability. This is one of those millionaire stories where what begins as a contract grows into something far deeper, highlighting the powerful transformation of two individuals. As they grapple with their feelings, doubts, and fears, they learn to trust each other and open their hearts in ways they never thought possible. Like many other millionaire stories, this one teaches us that love can find its way even in the most unlikely of circumstances, changing lives in profound ways. Gabriel, a successful and distant millionaire, has always kept his emotions guarded. But through his relationship with Sarah, he begins to understand that wealth and success are nothing without real human connection. These millionaire stories often have unexpected twists, and in this one, the journey from pretense to genuine love is both heartwarming and inspiring. Their love story, forged through trust and self-discovery, proves that sometimes the most extraordinary connections begin in the most ordinary of circumstances, making it a standout among other millionaire stories. As the narrative comes to an end, Sarah and Gabriel's love blossoms into something both real and beautiful, showing how two people can change each other's lives forever in the most unexpected ways. This story, filled with passion, growth, and real transformation, is another example of why millionaire stories continue to captivate hearts everywhere.